Pro Football Now, we are back for another season, but we have some new friends and some new segments this year, and that all starts right now. Peter King, the editor-in-chief of the MMQB.com, is here alongside Albert Breer. This is how we're going to start the show each week, guys, emptying the notebook, finding out what you know, and telling our viewers all about it. And let's just start with coaches. And Peter, coaches that need to get off to a good start this season to avoid getting on the proverbial hot seat. Who are we talking about?
Number one, Jim Caldwell of the Detroit Lions. I think that especially because they got a winnable game week one, Arizona. In my opinion, Caldwell, it's essential that the first 8 weeks of this season, he has the Detroit Lions in contention. One guy who everybody would say, well, he should be on the hot seat, but he isn't, and he won't be on the hot seat all year, is Hugh Jackson. Coming off a 1-15 season. I spent time in training camp with Jimmy and Dee Haslam, the owners of the Browns. He's in no trouble whatsoever, nor is Sashi Brown, the general manager or the management team, because, as Jimmy Haslam told me in the summer, listen, we've made mistakes before being impatient, so this year we're going to be patient.
And here's what I would jump on Peter's point about Detroit, and part of the reason why Jim Caldwell has to win is because the general manager there inherited Jim Caldwell. So I think there are a couple other situations to watch. One would be the Indianapolis Colts, where I think Chuck Pagano is under evaluation now. They hired Chris Ballard 3 weeks, or they fired Ryan Grigson 3 weeks into the offseason. They hired Chris Ballard a month in, too late to make a coaching change. And so now I think Chris Ballard is evaluating Chuck Pagano, and Chuck Pagano's got to win or at least show progress with all the new defensive pieces. And another situation that's a little bit like that is the Tennessee Titans. Now, I'm not saying Mike Mularkey's in trouble right now, but the expectation there is that they're going to compete for a playoff spot. And if they don't, that's another general manager who inherited his head coach. And so in those two spots, I think you could see where if things go the wrong way, maybe the GM pulls the trigger and now he gets to make his coach hire. And then the other one to watch, I think everybody's going to be keeping an eye on, is the New York Jets, where you can't expect too much out of Todd Bowles, but I think that the environment in the building is going to be crucial, where at the end of the year, this thing can't be a dumpster fire. It can't be we're going into 2018, and not only we bring a new quarterback in, but we've got to right everything in the building.
Okay, so let me ask you quickly about two other situations.
Yep.
Let me ask you about Houston and New Orleans. Yeah. We all think that Houston could be troublesome. A 9-7, 8-8 year could be trouble for Bill O'Brien, because I think the owner favors the general manager, Rick Smith. So that's one. But New Orleans, I think, is odd, too, because even though they owe Sean Payton $8 billion over the next 3 years, I think there's a little impatience there, 7-9, 7-9, 7-9. What do you think about those two?
Well, and Sean Payton's been there for so long now. This is his 11th season?
Well, yeah, because he missed the 1 year.
Right, his 12th year there. He's well into his second decade there as the head coach of the Saints. 7-9, 7-9, 7-9. Now they're going to be incorporating a lot of young guys. Like, they're going to be relying on Ryan Ramczyk to be their left tackle, a rookie. Two guys, and Marshawn Lattimore and Marcus Williams, to shore up their secondary. They lose Brandon Cooks. There are a lot of moving pieces there for a team that hasn't been great the last 3 years. And, I think if Sean Payton had tried to walk away a couple of years ago, which he was very close to doing after the 2015 season, the Colts were in play for him. If he had walked out the door, then the Saints would have asked for a bounty of draft picks. I don't know that if he tried to leave after 2017, if things don't go the right way, if the demands would be the same. In Houston, I'm with Peter on that one. I think that a divorce there between Rick Smith and Bill O'Brien is possible.
Okay, let's stop on Indianapolis for a moment, because is it fair for Chuck Pagano to be evaluated when his starting quarterback and the franchise quarterback is not going to begin this season because of his shoulder injury?
Well, whether it's fair or unfair, I think they're going to be looking at the bottom line. They have an impatient owner who basically needs to see progress. Look, Maggie, I think Andrew Luck's going to miss maybe 3 games. I don't think he's going to miss many more than that. But I think that this is a difficult one to try to diagnose, because, in my opinion, probably 3 of their most important 10 players, maybe 3 of their most important 7 or 8, because their center Kelly and the cornerback Vontae Davis are all going to be out for multiple weeks to start the year. This is a team that isn't as good, maybe with all them being healthy, as Houston or Tennessee. With all them being unhealthy, they might not be as good as Jacksonville. So this is a team that I think deserves to have its temperature taken, and it will, because all three of those guys will come back. But if they finish 5-11, 6-10, I don't see there's any way that coach stays.
And I think one of the important things when you're looking at a situation like that, I mean, look, if Scott Tolzien's got to play 6 weeks, say, and I don't think that's likely, but of course the bar is going to be lower, right? Like no one's going to expect him to go 5-1 with Scott Tolzien as his starting quarterback. I think the key thing in a situation like that, when you've got a new general manager, how is he pushing things forward? So how are the young offensive linemen developing? Remember, they didn't do a lot up front. Chris Ballard basically said, you know, we're happy with what Ryan Grigson's put together here. We think there's potential. So how does that group come along? How does Malik Hooker come along at safety? How does Quincy Wilson come along at corner? There are a lot of new players there. So I think more important than the win-loss record in Indianapolis is player development and how the whole thing looks at the end of the year. And can Jim Irsay and Chris Ballard look down on that field in Week 17 and say, you know what, we've got a lot to look forward to in 2018. That sort of thing, I think, is going to determine where Chuck Pagano is at the end of the year.
Another team that you guys mentioned where you said you just hope it's not a dumpster fire at the end of the year is the New York Jets. And, you know, I don't remember a season going into it where you had teams where winning does not appear to be the most important thing. You can call it tanking, you can call it what it is. But, Peter, is this going to become a trend?
That's a perfect way to put it. Can I tell you what you just said? You put it perfectly. And that is, you know, winning is not the most important thing. And, you know, everybody on the Jets will say, oh, yes, it is. Yes, it is. It's a pile of crap. It's not the most important thing. If it was the most important thing, Sheldon Richardson would still be in the locker room. Eric Decker, David Harris, Nick Mangold, they'd still be in the locker room. They're not in the locker room. My point is that the most important thing is watching college football on Saturday to see which quarterback is the best, and they're going to get one of those guys. In my opinion, Maggie, the trade for Sheldon Richardson, it has to be in the back of Mike Maccagnan's mind when he gets the low second-round pick, because that's what it will be for Sheldon Richardson. Okay, let's see. Can I move up 3 spots in the top 10 by throwing in that number 2? Or those are the kind of thoughts that any rational franchise architect of the New York Jets would be having right now.
And you know what? I think this has kind of gone in phases for the Jets. I think everyone agreed that they had to pull the Band-Aid off, right? Like and they did that in March when they got rid of Revis and Mangold and all of those veterans.
I'm not killing them for what they're doing.
I think where it changed was in June when they cut Harris and they cut Decker. I think that was a lot of people inside that building took it as a signal. Okay, the owner wants to go get the number 1 overall pick. And I think that actually led to the trade of Richardson because they recognized with Decker and Harris out of there, now all of a sudden, you know who their veteran guys were? Their veteran guys were Mo Wilkerson and Sheldon Richardson. And I think there were a lot of people in that building who were saying, what's going to happen if things go south here? What's going to happen if we're 1-9? How's Sheldon going to handle it in a contract year? How's Mo going to handle it when he knows he could be cut after the year? I think part of this was about trying to preserve any sort of sanity in that building if things go the way that everyone expects them to go, which is, you know, the team's not going to be very good.
Let's keep the defensive lineman conversation going and talk about Aaron Donald because he still has not reported. He's been holding out all of camp. This is a player who has been a 3-time first-team All-Pro heading into his 4th year. Many believe he's the best defensive player in the league, regardless of what the position is, and he's getting paid less than $2 million. How is this going to end, Albert?
I think part of the problem here is there's got to be a little bit of give back from the player because the Rams can legitimately have him. I think it's at about $8 million a year for the next 3 years if they go hold him on his rookie contract, option next year, and then tag in 2019. So he wants to be paid at the top of the market, which he deserves. He's one of the best defensive players in football. But you
can't just erase his contract now.
But that's if you're asking for that, what do Sue and Von Miller make? Well, they make $61 million over the first 3 years of their deals. And so that's part of the problem is, you know, I think the Rams look at it and say, we want to reward the guy, but if we're going to do it 2 years early, there needs to be some give back. Remember, Von Miller played out his entire rookie deal plus the option year. And Ndamukong Suh made it to unrestricted free agency. The reason those guys got paid the way they got paid is because they played it out. And Aaron Donald still has 2 years of his original deal to play out.
That's the exact correct diagnosis of this situation because the Rams, Albert, I was there the first weekend of training camp. Mentally, the Rams are fine with paying him Von Miller money, but they simply are not going to erase the next 2 years. They're just not going to do it. And I think it's unfair in this case, for the player to think that not only am I going to make a little bit more than Von Miller, but I don't have to live by the terms of this onerous contract right now. So there's an easy solution to this, at least in my opinion. And the solution that will happen if he does come in this week. And that solution is saying, okay, we're going to give you the guarantee of Von Miller. We're going to give you the average of Von Miller. But you have to fold in one of these 2 years that you have to play for as part of that deal. We're not giving you both away. We'll give one of those years away. And then we will pay you over the entire term of this. We'll pay you a little bit more than Von Miller, but we're not forgiving both of the next 2 years.
By the way, I don't blame Aaron Donald at all for doing what he's doing because, look, I mean, he's coming off a year when he was one of the best defensive players in football, and he's going into playing in a new scheme now. So, like, on paper, I know what Wade has said. Wade has said he's going to be like J.J. Watt.
Wade Phillips, their defensive coordinator.
Wade Phillips believes I can play him like I played J.J. Watt in Houston. But there's still some unknown there. And so if you're Aaron Donald, you're sitting there and you're thinking to yourself, my earning window as a football player isn't very long. I don't know exactly what I'm going to look like in this new defense. So I need to do everything that I possibly can to get paid.
Can I say one other thing about that? Like, to me, I agree with you on that score, but if I'm Aaron Donald, I'm saying the one thing I don't want to do is to give up this year, like to show up in week 3 or 4, where the team is not going to be really motivated to do a lot for me. And I'll tell you why. Because he doesn't have one contract left. He has got 2 contracts left. And so, I mean, assuming nothing happens to his knees or shoulders, he's going to be playing this game for the next 8 or 10 years. Mm-hmm. So I think that's why it's incumbent on him to get in and to make as much as he can now. He is going to have another bite at the apple.
Gentlemen, that's where we'll leave it this week. Of course, we'll be doing this now every week on PFN, entering the reporter's notebook. Appreciate all that information. And now another new segment, this from our friends at Pro Football Focus. Here are Steve Palazzolo and Sam Monson.
This is Steve Palazzolo.
And I'm Sam Monson.
We're Pro Football Focus, and this is Well Actually. Today we're talking about the Dallas Cowboys offensive line, a line that everybody seems to think either was the best offensive line in the league last year and will be once again this year. Well, actually, the numbers tell a different story.
If you look last season at the PFF grades, the number 1 offensive line in football was the Tennessee Titans. Fantastic grades across the line. No weak link on that line, which you can't say about the Dallas Cowboys either last year or heading into this year. But the other team to throw out there is the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you take away the first 3 weeks of the season, that Steelers line was an absolute force going into the playoffs, allowed only 88 total pressures over the course of the year, 18 better than Dallas, and the number 1 mark in the NFL.
Yeah, and if you just say after that cutoff point, 86.2 pass blocking efficiency, meaning, yes, they're giving up pressure at a lower rate than any other team in the NFL. Let's back up and talk about the Tennessee Titans. They came out of nowhere to be our top-graded offensive line last year. Right tackle Jack Conklin, the best rookie offensive tackle in the NFL last year, a career year for Taylor Lewan, and breakout players on the interior, Quentin Spain, Josh Klein, both of those guys exceeding expectations. Can Tennessee keep it up? And then Pittsburgh, I think the thing that I really like is just it is the consistency across the board. Ali Villanueva turned his career around at left tackle to give them solid players from left to right.
Tennessee was a big shock last year. I think the style of football they play really helps that line. They're now a power running football team the way nobody else in the league really is
good
at the
at
moment.
It. Really good.
And it plays to all of their strengths. So if anything is going to keep them high, it's that style of play. But you would expect some kind of regression from at least a couple of guys on that offensive line and maybe expect them to fall back a little bit.
2 more offensive lines that have to be in the mix, the Green Bay Packers and the Oakland Raiders. If you look at the Packers, the entire season last year, they were number 1 in pass blocking efficiency, 84.8. And that's with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, a guy who holds the ball over 3 seconds per snap. That's one of the longest times in the NFL, meaning he's putting a ton of pressure on that offensive line to keep him clean. And then Oakland only allowed 8 sacks all last season. Their pass blocking efficiency was number 2, just behind Green Bay, 84.7. Both numbers as part of PFF Edge. What do you think of Oakland and Green Bay maybe being in the mix and perhaps even better than the Dallas Cowboys? And let's go back and talk about those Cowboys. You know, they're still one of the best offensive lines in the league, but is it too top heavy? A lot of times it's all about your weakest link in the NFL if you're talking about giving up pressure, missing that one block that's going to break down a run. But at left tackle, Tyron Smith. At center, Travis Frederick. At right guard, Zach Martin. 3 Pro Bowl players. The big questions, though, left guard, is it going to be Jonathan Cooper filling in there? And then right tackle, Lyle Collins heading into year 3, but his first year in the NFL at tackle. Will those 2 spots end up doing them in by the end of the season?
Yeah, Collins was not a good guard in the NFL, but the good news is so far in preseason action, he's allowed just 1 hurry in 90 snaps. So at right tackle, he looks like he might be the answer for them, at which point you're back in the conversation. There's only one potential weak link on that line.
3 Pro Bowlers on the Dallas offensive line. It's going to come down to the 2 question marks as far as whether or not they're going to be the best offensive line in the NFL this season.
Hey, I'm Corey Parson, the fantasy executive with your Pro Football Now market share. Let's start in Miami with Dolphin wide receiver Devontae Parker. Now, Parker has not lived up to his talent so far since he's been in the NFL, mainly because of the play of Ryan Tannehill. But now you bring in Jay Cutler. Cutler's a more aggressive downfield thrower. Let's look at Cutler's air yards metric. Cutler always finishes with inside the top 10 in air yards at somewhere around 4.4 yards per attempt. Now, Ryan Tannehill on the other side finished towards the bottom at 3.1 yards per attempt. That means that a big body wide receiver like Devontae Parker, who can get down the field, will be targeted more often than Jarvis Landry and Jay Cutler's offense. As a matter of fact, Cutler already said that Parker was like a Alshon Jeffrey type receiver, except for faster. Another player whose numbers should regress in 2017 is Atlanta Falcon running back Tevin Coleman. Last season, Tevin Coleman scored 11 touchdowns. That rate of success is not sustainable, even in the Atlanta Falcons' high-powered offense, not to mention the fact new offensive coordinator Steve Sarkisian may just decide to work bell cow running back Devonta Freeman. Another wide receiver who should see an uptick in numbers this year is Chris Hogan of the New England Patriots. The injury to Julian Edelman will open up routes run in the slot for Hogan. Last season, Hogan ran 26 routes out the slot. He caught 20 of those passes. That's 77%. 9 of those 20 receptions went for more than 20 yards. So look for Hogan to be somewhere in that wide receiver 25 range when the season comes to an end. And lastly, our rising star of 2017 is going to be Chicago Bear wide receiver Kendall Wright. Once again, an injury is going to lead to more production for Kendall Wright. We saw Cam Meredith go out for the season. Kendall Wright, who was in the system in Tennessee with Dow Loggins, who is now the offensive coordinator in Chicago, in that special year in Tennessee, Kendall Wright had over 1,000 yards receiving and 94 receptions. He's going to be a breakout star in PPR leagues.
Well, thanks, Corey. All right, so what we're going to do here is take you through probably the 2 most common questions I've gotten on radio over these last 3 months. Who will be the surprise turnaround team, and who will be the team to disappoint? And we got to preface this one because it's such a popular topic. The pickings for teams that'll truly surprise or disappoint, they're pretty thin. So I'm going to give you 2 good teams and give them a chance to be great. Let's start with the Philadelphia Eagles. In a league starved for offensive linemen, Doug Peterson's group brings back one of the league's most imposing fronts. And on the other side of the ball, they've got an emerging group that adds Derek Barnett and Timmy Jernigan to a group that was already throwing Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, and Vinnie Curry at offenses. That's the foundation. And if a couple things break right, Ronald Darby bounces back from a bad 2016, Alshon Jeffrey stays healthy, the Eagles should be in position to break through behind burgeoning sophomore quarterback Carson Wentz. In the AFC, the chalk surprise is Tennessee, and I'm going to go with the chalk. Similar to the Eagles, the Titans are stout on both lines, have a young stud at quarterback in Marcus Mariota, and have a handful of youthful vets set to take another step. Moreover, they have identity. This team's been built with a vision. As the rest of the league zigs, with pass-happy offenses and smaller defenses to match, Tennessee is looking to take games into a dark alley. So if those are the 2 teams set to break through, who's going to level off? Stick with that theme of line play. The Denver Broncos quarterback situation got all the attention last year, but their offensive line was a bigger problem and will need rookie Garrett Bowles to grow up quickly at left tackle. And on defense, a unit that'll need to carry the offense through some growing pains has lost 5 starters from the group that won Super Bowl 50, and they're in the toughest division in football. Over in the NFC, the Saints are coming off 3 straight 7-9 seasons. They lost left tackle Terron Armstead to a torn labrum and will be relying on rookie Ryan Ramczyk to replace him. Brandon Cooks is gone, and if the defense is going to make up for some of the losses on offense, it'll need rookies Marshawn Lattimore and Marcus Williams to ascend quick. And if you add that up, that's a lot of pressure on a number of rookies to play really prominent roles in this, the final season of Drew Brees' contract. So there you have it. Eagles and Titans up, Broncos and Saints down. Take that to the bank.